everyone, this is Ishwarya Goyal
And I'm Nilesh.
from Towards Scaling Inference. Towards Scaling Inference is a place where you can learn about ML deployments from zero to scale. We are very excited to have James, co-founder and CEO of Mana, with us today. At Mana, they are building conversational AI tools that augment how we work, learn, and live. Rated #1 on Product Hunt and is built with love by team who have scaled products across Apple, Amazon, McKinsey, and SoftBank. Thank you, James, for joining us today.
Thank you very much. It's great to be here.
Awesome. So we would like to start the interview, James, by understanding that could you provide us some specific use cases of how Mana AI technology has helped your customers?
Sure. So we're currently a suite of different AI tools. And so broadly, there's a B2C and a B2B component. So in B2B, the main focus is on automating sales for our clients. So our clients can describe their ICP, their ideal customer profile, and then we will scrape those customer profiles. We will generate personalized messages across all of those leads, and then we'll send them across channels, right? So we could do LinkedIn, we could do email, we could do Instagram. And so in doing that, we basically free up a lot of time for the sales reps. We take away the grunt work they do in sourcing all those leads and make it much easier for them to convert them as well through very personalized messaging. So that's the B2B side. And then on B2C, we're mostly focused on education. And so we've built an AI tutor specifically for K-12 students. It allows them to ask almost any homework question, but instead of getting an answer, it actually guides them to understand how to get to the answer. And so it goes through sort of step-by-step instructions. It's able to do math, through Wolfram Alpha integration, and it's also able to do sort of more conceptual questions, obviously through multiple foundational models feeding into it as well. So yeah, that's how we serve our clients today.
Got it. And is Mana's AI-powered software is built on top of third-party APIs, or is it more of a custom solution developed in-house?
Yeah, so it's very much built on foundational models today. And so we use Open AI and Cohere very heavily. So Open AI for GPT-4 at the moment, and Cohere for a lot of embeddings, as well. And then we build on top of that with additional fine-tuning and dynamic prompting, right? And so we do a lot of work basically figuring out, for example, if we take hyperscale, we save our users edited drafts, we save high response emails that are generating really good sort of outcomes for their clients. And then we use it to dynamically prompt the model to give them more personalized emails over time, right? And so we basically augment what large language models are able to do to serve our clients more.
Got it. And how do you go about getting the data for training for these AI models? Could you just walk us a little bit process of data collection, and how do you convert that into a full-fledged model?
Yeah, for sure. So a lot of our focus is on data collection that's inherent in the model itself. And so, for example, we take hyperscale. Essentially, what we do in that sales automation product, and so we have sort of 3 stages. The first stage is we are basically helping the customer source sort of customer data. And in doing that, we basically plug into multiple different APIs, right? So, you look at things like, proxy curl, you look at job contact, all these sorts of things, right? And we basically combine the data that we get across different sources. So we can scrape through LinkedIn profiles and combine that with email and corporate email data and so on and so forth. And so let's say I am a IT support consultancy, and I'm going, hey, I want to find companies, the heads of IT of companies are hiring for IT people because they're my ideal sort of customer to target. What we first do is scrape the job platforms to get you the companies that are hiring for IT people. Then we flip back into LinkedIn to look for the company profiles that are, actually, behind those job postings. And then we find the heads of IT of those companies inside LinkedIn. And then we scrape across different email providers to find you the corporate email domains of these individuals. And then we combine all that into one profile. Right? And so that's the first stage. And then once you get that, we then go into the personalization where we use GPT-4 to generate personalized emails across all of those leads. Now, how does the model then get trained? Naturally, in this whole process, while you're sort of actually training this model, by actually using the product, you first have a lot of data of what users are actually searching for, right? So what are the types of leads they actually care about? And how does that tie to the type of customer they have, right? So we can see, IT support consultancies turn out to, continually pitch SMEs in the long tail, right? Or, design agencies tend to have really good luck with, middle American businesses who struggle with design and so on, right? So you get a lot of, of data of what are they searching for and what's actually working out. And the second is, once you go into the sort of personalization, you get a lot more in the sort of edited drafts and the sort of high response emails, right? So you can see what types of messaging is actually working for their sales. And so all of these things then help us perfect the model further. And so we have two, for hyperscale, for example, we have two distinct things. One is like training the personalization for the emails, which is very much built on the large language models. And all we're doing there is basically adding on top like dynamic prompts based on the most relevant emails that we could use to help you personalize your emails. But on the other end, when you look at the searching, that's not really based on large language models, right? That's really actually based on, how do we use your past searches and the types of clients that tend to work for you in order to refine your search results further over time. And so throughout this whole process, back to your original question, the data collection is actually inherent in the product because it's the user using us day to day that actually gives us those data sources to use for the model in the future.
Got it. So if I understand correctly, then you're basically also using like not just one model, but an ensemble of models where multiple models are combining together to give you the business output, right? Is that a correct understanding?
Yes, that's correct.
Got it. No, that's awesome. And I think how you have also clubbed a lot of like prediction and generation models together. So could you just describe us a little bit more on like how do you evaluate the performance of like, let's say the generative model or the predictive model? And then are you also using techniques like fine tuning, or are you using like more of giving it the context and then using generation using that context? So like, again, two different questions.
Yeah, for sure. To answer the second part first, so we actually started off with a lot of fine tuning when GPT-4 was not available yet, and we were focused on GPT-3, and we used like human loop in the middle of our infrastructure layer to basically do the fine tuning as well. It's a fantastic product, like really great UX to help us do that. The main issue we hit, of course, is that it takes a very large volume until personalization really sort of starts kicking in with the fine tuning there, and especially in the context that we're operating in, where we need the user to really have a different style for different clients, right? So, if an IT support consultancy pitches a certain way, it's not going to work the same way for a manufacturing company. It's not going to work the same way for a design studio. And so the sort of fine tuning can't work on the model as a whole level. It has to work on a customer specific level, and that makes it even more challenging when there's not a sort of very large volume of data. And so we changed our approach with the availability of GPT-4. First, because there's no fine-tuning option yet for GPT-4, and so we can't really do anything for that. But second, because we realized that with the complexity of the prompting that you could get to with even just a 8K context limit, you're able to then just dynamically prompt it with extremely relevant sort of information, right? And so what we then focused on is basically figuring out, for this particular user, what are the past emails that have worked well for them in terms of messaging? And how can we find the most relevant email for the current context they're in, right? So if they're pitching a business partner, if they're pitching a specific decision maker or a specific user, right? So different types of messaging. And we pull in the most relevant template into the prompt, so that when they generate, it feels like naturally for the user becomes a much sort of easier translation. So that's on the fine tuning side of things. In terms of how we measure our performance. So our main focus really is on tying it to specific business outcomes. So our big belief is basically a lot of the sort of technical metrics are interesting internally, but really what matters is it creating the outcome for the customer? And so if I take hyperscale as an example again, that's actually extremely easy to measure, because when you look at the open rates and the response rates of these emails, it's a direct translation of what's working, right? And so we focus almost exclusively on that, because it tells us a blend of whether personalization is working and whether the sourcing is continually getting better.
Got it. And got it. So for you, the output metrics is that, and then like how do you change that? Like, let's say the success metric to, let's say, fine tune the model a little bit more. Do you like try to, let's say, for prediction, try to like put more human label data, or like for fine tuning, try to like tweak the context you're giving? Like, how do you like try to, like, if you have to, like, let's say delta increase that number, how do you go about that?
Yeah. So one of the sort of core inputs when we were doing fine tuning before, obviously it's a little different now, but when we were doing it before, what we focused on was actually the user providing us with some history of emails that they've sent before. And so they gave us a sense of, hey, here are the cold email campaigns we've done before. These are the ones that performed the best, right? And basically using those as almost emulating the assistant and user conversation, right? So, but in this case, it's basically email threads of them with a sort of cold outreach client and seeing the responses that work. And so that was like a core source for us at the time. That's obviously completely changed now.
Got it. Got it. Got it. No, this is super helpful, and especially like coming to the last part, right, of deployment. So once you already had these models, right? So I'm understanding GPT-4, you're directly using an API. But for the other models, how have you gone about the deployment process? And like, just wanted to understand that part. Yeah.
Yeah, so our stack is actually fairly simple. So we basically, yes, we have a sort of the base models behind it, and then we basically almost chiefly use like human loop as our infrastructure layer to be able to use that as basically the UX for us to do the fine tuning, to actually A/B test like the changes in the model as well, and then use that to deploy directly into our product as well. And so they essentially act as like the sort of interim layer between what we've trained so far and also collecting all the user data and then reflecting it back. And so they've kind of become the main API we call instead of all the sort of individual models as well.
Got it. And in terms of the like, let's say deploying these, like, do you use AWS, GCP, or like, how do you like? Are you using a managed service like SageMaker, or are you guys like doing it in Kubernetes? Like all these models, like where are you hosting them?
Yeah, like most of our stack is built on AWS at the moment.
Okay.
I'm a sort of non-technical co-founder, right? So there'll be parts where I won't be able to explain as much detail as my technical co-founder will be able to give you. But yeah, most of our stack is built on AWS today.
No, this is super helpful. And over to Aishwarya, I think.
Yeah. No, I think very interesting, James. I think you briefly touched upon like the ROI aspect, but would love to understand that what benefits have your customers seen with your product and how have they measured the ROI?
Yeah, so if you look at the sort of way our customers tend to look at it, they want to make sure lots of people are opening their emails. They want to make sure that lots of them are getting responses. And then once they respond, they want to make sure they convert. And so when you look at what we've been able to do, typically a client would come to us when they have like 30 or 40% cold email open rates, right? And we're able to boost that to 70% plus on average already, right? And then when you look at the response rates, typically it's in the 2 to 3% range, right? Maybe in the really good case, it would be like 7 or 8%, right? Usually single digits. And we're able to get them to 10 to 15% almost immediately upon deployment, right? The main reason is that the personalization causes someone to feel like, oh, wow, this is really a person writing to me. And when you look at some of the DMs, so you look at LinkedIn, Instagram DMs, and so on and so forth, that goes even better. So we can get to like 25% plus for DM response rates. And the main reason for this is that not only are we sort of personalizing on things like, oh, here's a job title, here's a name, and so on, we actually get the tone really, really deep to the person, right? So, for example, we recently worked with a company that targets college students at scale. And so we needed to get the Gen Z tone right? So you use tons of emojis, it needs to be really short, right? It needs to, it needs to not capitalize things, right? Like don't start capitalizing the jobs they've been at and so on and so forth, right? So you got all these bits and pieces right. But that's where we've sort of focused a lot of attention and that's gotten the response rates a lot higher. And so when you think about how our customers then overall evaluate us, at the moment we charge something like $349 for 1,000 qualified leads. And the ROI for them is massive. Because if you take a B2B services company, even just converting one lead every month is going to pay off, the service. And often at a 1% conversion rate, it's like 30x plus, ROI for them, right? And so the investment sort of really directly pays off there.
Yeah. No, very impressive. I think the number sounds pretty great, and I am gonna use the product after the call. So good to hear that. Yeah, and I would like to understand that what advice do you have for organizations, that are considering incorporating AI into their processes, and what are some common pitfalls they should avoid?
Yeah, so I think it's probably slightly different between different audiences. I think for startups, I think that the answer is actually quite simple. It's just the best time is now, right? So I keep hearing founders who sort of come talk to me and they're like, oh, I'm not sure whether like this AI thing is like a is it just a wave? It's probably just hype. It's gonna go, blah blah blah. It's like no, people are getting like real economic value out of it literally right now. And the best way to do it is to implement it across like both your backend processes and your product itself, right? Like even when we look at our team right now, our non-technical team is acting like they're a technical team because they're able to just constantly use ChatGPT to like do the things they need to do, and that's amazing, right? And they almost learn the technical stuff in the process of being able to talk to ChatGPT and learn what they need to do. And so being able to just become an AI native organization, super important really quickly across the board. So I think for startups, it's like pretty simple. It's like the best time is now. For the people who are actively building, I think the one common pitfall that I tend to see is people almost think of GPT-4 as some kind of like knowledge retrieval engine, or they kind of go, oh, like it either like, oh, it doesn't seem to know this very well, and therefore it doesn't work at all, or it's like, oh, I'm just going to rely on this for like everything that it knows about, right? Which are both quite terrifying. And often you also in the testing process, because GPT-4 is so much better than GPT 3.5, you get like 80% good answers, and you think, oh, now it's ready to deploy in the world, and then it just absolutely crashes and burns. And so I think the best framing to this day I still think is true is basically that GPT-4 is a fantastic reasoning engine, not a knowledge retrieval engine. And so what you feed it matters as much as, if not more than, how you prompt it. And so even in the context of, if we take hyperscale, the data points that we feed it, the trigger events to sort of deal with personalization is much more important than how we prompt it to personalize, right? So if I'm able to feed it, hey, here's a recent article the recipient has written, or like here's a recent Twitter post from that person, GPT-4 is perfectly capable of taking that and combining it with your product value proposition and saying, hey, I saw your tweet recently and this is like really amazing. This is what you can do, right? So like that's great personalization. But if you just like focus our time prompt engineering and going like, how do I do personalization really well? GPT-4 can only do so much, right? Like it's actually the data points that matter. So that's for active builders. And the final piece for legacy players, and that's really for the big corporates of the world and so on. And I think there's this giant opportunity right now that I think scares every active builder in the space, because everyone's like, there's no differentiation in LLMs and all that. It's that the legacy players have all the data, right? And data is really the only moat left, because all the other modes are taken. so then so legacy player is really the ideal thing, is convert your data into a moat, turn it into a distribution advantage. And I was talking to a bunch of sort of corporate supermarket sort of CFOs and CEOs the other day at an event, and we were chatting about this, and I was like, look, why have there been sort of AI powered grocery apps? Because it's such a sort of clear thing, right? Like, I want to talk to my AI assistant to come up with a recipe and then buy all the ingredients for me, like such an obvious use case. Why have there been so many experiments of this in the US, but not a single one in the UK, right? What's the difference? And the main difference is very simple. It's that Walmart has the best supermarket API in the world. And you can instantly plug into it, and you can instantly earn 2 to 3% affiliate fee just by funneling demand to them with whatever product you build on top. In the UK, not a single of the supermarket players have an API, right? So you can't build anything on it, and they think they're protecting their data flows, but actually they're falling behind, because the next thing that's going to happen is some new player is going to do it, and then they're going to plug into ChatGPT or whatever, and it's going to become a sort of game-changing product. And so they should turn their data into a moat. And turn it into their distribution advantage. That's where I think they're going to win the game. So yeah, that's what I think about the market in general.
Yeah, no, I think I loved your analogy, and especially I think the reasoning behind on how we can position data as a mode. So quite interesting. Finally, would love to know, what are your top 3 generative AI companies or companies who have successfully incorporated AI in their workflows, and why do you like them?
Yeah, I think there's kind of 3. So Runway, because it just literally wows me every time. The text to video stuff.
I love that product too. Yeah,
unbelievable. Exactly. And to think also they were really the people, one of the key people behind Stability Diffusion, Stable Diffusion. And so like they've contributed so much to the space, and it's just absolutely incredible. So I love that. The script, because really more of a principle what they're trying to do, which is that they have effectively invented a new UX enabled by AI. And I think that's kind of where all of us need to aim for, where it's not a skin on top of the LLM, but it's the fact that LLMs are now enabling something that you can't do before. And for me, like video editing with text, just amazing. And I've been using it a lot myself. So it's been an incredible use case. The final one's LangChain, not really a company the wrote before, but it's changing how everyone's deploying LLMs and super helpful for all the embeddings we're using as well. So love it. And yeah, those three.
Yeah, no, definitely. I think all three companies that you mentioned, they are doing some like really great work in their respective industries, and I personally like them too. So good to know that. Awesome. So yeah, I think these were our questions, James. I really appreciate you taking out time for the call. I personally enjoyed the session, and I'm pretty sure that whoever is listening to the episode will also, benefit from it. Thank you once again for taking out time for the call.
Great. Awesome. Thank you very much. Great to be here.